Welcome to Sleepless in St. Canard, where nostalgia replaces REM cycles. I'm Kitty.
And I'm Ange.
We haven't slept
in 30 years.
This is a podcast about the 90s Disney cartoon, The Herb Muddlefoot Hour, starring everyone's favorite suburbanite, Herb Muddlefoot, and his much lesser-known neighbor, Darkwing Duck. Today is a momentous day for me! Ange, are you feeling the warm glow of muddlefootedness about today's show? The spiritual guidance of multi-level marketing reliance? Can you wear the suit and make the sales to boot? Can we keep up with the rhymes the whole damn time? That's right! Neighbors and Quackerware owners, it's the day we talk about our Lord and Savior, Herb Muddlefoot in The Merchant of Menace.
Herb.
Before we get over to that, I think Ange has some announcements about that other guy. You know, the other one. What's his name? The Darkwing fella.
Yeah, the Darkwing fella who is getting a comic, and we talked about this previously in the comic coverage series that we did, but they have finally announced who is writing it, who is drawing it, and we have gotten a bunch of variant covers and a couple sneak peeks into the inside pages, which is very exciting. So first and foremost, it is a brand new series, completely blank slate. They're not taking anything, as far as I can tell, from the Boom Studios or Joe Comics. The writer is, I hope I can get her last name right, it's Amanda Diabert. Is that how you pronounce it?
I mean, sounds good to me.
That's what we're going with. And the art is by Carlos Sid Loro, who is part of Mirka Andolfo's studio.
Huh.
But Amanda Diabert has quite the, what's the word there? The
resume?
Yeah, quite the resume behind her of stuff. She's written for DC Superhero Girls and Wonder Woman, ton of other stuff. So I can see why she was put on this, because it's kind of runs in the same vein of, you know, that kind of humor, fun, cartoony hero stuff. So I have here an article, and Kitty and I were talking about it. So they give us a little blurb description about the first issue, which is going to be dropping in January. And there is already pre-orders they are taking for it as of this recording, which is, I guess it's technically November pre-orders, even though it is October still. I don't really know how the comic book industry works, but they have 7 different variant covers. And but the first issue, it says here on this, there was like 50 million comic book news sites that dropped the news at the same time, and they all kind of said the same thing. So I just picked one. And they said, so what's Darkwing Duck all about? Issue number 1. He is the terror that flaps in the night. He is the ferocious fowl who plucks the evil eye from the face of foul play. He is Darkwing Duck. By night, he vigilantly defends his city of St. Canard from the dastardly, devilish demons who would wage wanton war with his trademark costume and gadgets, and lurks through the shadows, striking fear in the heart of the criminal underworld. By day, he's known as the mild-mannered, yeah, right, Drake Mallard, father to his adorable adopted daughter, Goslin. Can Darkwing successfully juggle his 2 separate lives, all while looking incredibly cool and impossibly handsome? Readers will have to tune in on January 4th to find out. And I'm pretty sure there was an additional blurb I saw somewhere about it starting off with Megavolt showing up. And
yeah, something you shared had something to that extent about Megavolt. I forget what the premise was, but I feel like any first issue, having Megavolt in it is a pretty decent start.
So it says here, popular writer Amanda Diabert will write the latest escapades of everyone's favorite fowl. Diabert has a range of diverse experience as a writer for television, animation, and comics, including Netflix's He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, Wonder Woman, Star Wars, DC Superhero Girls, and more. Darkwing Duck was huge when I was a kid, and I am thrilled to help introduce the fun, humor, and action-packed mystery to a new generation, she says. And then it says she's joined by Italian artist Carlos Sid Loro. Loro will be coloring the series himself, with Jeff Eckelberry handling the lettering. The first story, subtitled Foul Play, and it's foul as in fiendish organization of world larceny, kicks off a showdown between Darkwing and his dastardly arch-nemesis Megavolt. He's taken out everyone's phones, which is pretty cataclysmic outcome for the citizens of St. Canard. Alongside his ally Launchpad McQuack and some unexpected help from Goslin, the squad will take on Megavolt. But the latest escapade makes Mallard question the entire superhero business and consider retiring. How long can he go without meting out justice? And then it goes into all the different covers, because there's several. And I saw that they made a point of mentioning that they wanted it to be connected with the classic feel of the show, but 100% accessible for new readers.
Nice. Best way to go about it, really.
Yeah, I agree. And then the only part that made me laugh is it says, alongside Darkwing Duck, Launchpad McQuack, and Goslin, fans will get to see countless favorite characters in the series. Tune in for possible appearances by Morgana Macabre, Bushroot, Dr. No Good, and more. Wasn't Dr. No Good from the DuckTales, 1987, I think?
I have no memory of that man, or woman. I don't even know their gender. I have no memory of them. So, fan favorite, Dr. No Good.
Dr. No Good. It would be even funnier if it was Dr. Slug.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Kitty, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are, from what you've shown me, as far as the artwork and everything, I like it. It seems pretty straightforward, and I don't know, I'm interested to see where it goes. Stays kind of true to the tone of the actual show. That would be awesome. Yeah, it's just exciting to have the possibility of something new and Darkwing, and hopefully like our Darkwing back on the scene again.
Plenty of comics for us to talk about in the future on the podcast.
Yes, hopefully with a lot less of Negaduck being saved by the power of friendship.
Hopefully. But yeah.
How do you feel about this?
I have mixed feelings right now because there hasn't been enough information given out. I will say, so they showed the first 3 pages without any dialogue or context. And I think the art looks pretty good. It's very clean. Like the line art and everything is very clean and simple. The only thing that I kind of noticed was that I kind of got the impression that a lot of the posing in those pages was heavily referenced from the Darkwing Duck model sheets. Like there was like a couple poses there that were like straight out almost identical to some of the poses on his Disney model sheet. But I don't know the context of what's happening without the letters. So for all we know, that could have been intentional. Like he could have been striking a whole bunch of iconic poses because he's in front of an audience. It looks like he's standing with the mayor, who is Mayor Zan Owlson from the DuckTales
reboot. Yeah,
the writer confirmed that is Zan Owlson. So it looks like even a couple DuckTales reboot characters might be showing up. Even though
learn the lines, baby.
Yeah, like it's interesting because it's set in what looks like the 91 universe. Goslin, her design is the 91 version. Launchpad is the 91 version. But I guess they just thought it would be cool to put her in there, which I like because I liked Zan Owlson. She was a lot of fun. So he's standing in front of an audience and they're all filming him on their phones, and it looks like he's giving a speech of some sort. And he's showing off for the audience. So it's very possible that it was intentional that he's striking a bunch of poses that look like iconic Darkwing poses. And then we see him in a couple pages where he's falling off the roof and Launchpad tries to catch him and then gets caught up, and they're both, about to fall off the roof, and Goslin looks very unamused.
As she should.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like hopefully or cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, that's what I would say. Like the writer herself seems pretty, on the ball. She's very she had a lot of support when she posted about it on Twitter. I even quote retweeted her just stating that, I'm a longtime fan and there was a time when we had a drought where there was no Darkwing Duck anything. So it's really great seeing all this new stuff. And she retweeted me, which was interesting because I was checking the little, you can see how many people have looked at your stuff out a tweet, and within like the first 10 minutes, like 1,000 people had looked at what I said, and I was like, oh god, I can feel their eyes on me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I should reserve all judgment until I see her Muddlefoots. But,
Yes.
Amanda, we're here. We're listening. We're waiting.
Yeah, and I mean Morgana,
And,
we saw her on one of the covers, so I want to
Mhm.
know. I want to know what they're going to do with Morgana. That's the big question here because of her characterization. It's just it could go anywhere, and I want to know how she'll handle that.
Yeah, it's interesting to have a lady at the helm, which, hopefully will smooth out a bit of Morgana's uneven writing.
Yeah, I am very curious. I don't think, aside from the cartoon, which had a few ladies writing now and again, we've never had, I don't think, in any of the comics that I've seen. I apologize if there has been, and I'm just not aware of it. Maybe like the Darkwing Duck Disney Adventures or the Disney Afternoon, but
Was Toy With Me?
Toy With
Wasn't that a
Me.
lady?
No, that
Or
was.
she just drew it.
Yeah, that was Sabrina Alberghetti was the artist, but Ian Brill wrote that one.
Gotcha. Okay.
Very interesting, but she seems to be getting a lot of support, which is good because I know that a lot of people were still very attached to the Joe Books run and just the overall Aaron Sparrow and James Silvani variation of the characters because it was left off. Like, we haven't gotten to that on the podcast, Kitty, so you don't even know what's happened in the comics. But in the Joe Books run, it was left off on a bit of a cliffhanger with a lot of stuff that was never resolved. So some people are kind of wanting to see that, but most people I saw were like, even the people I saw that were previously like, nah, I'm not interested if it's not going to be a continuation, are all now like, I just bought all 7 variants. I have no money left.
Well, I feel like this is just setting the stage for her to impress us. So she needs to write in so many tiny ties. And I'm listening.
And if you, out there listeners, would like to purchase this comic, you can get in contact with your local comic book shop, I suppose. What I discovered, because I haven't actually purchased comics in like 10 years and have not been into a comic book shop in a really long time, there is a website called Previews World. And if you go to Previews World and you make a account, there's a lot of basically worldwide comic book shops that are connected, and you can connect to your local comic book shop through an account on Previews World, and then all the stuff that's upcoming, you can pre-order it through this website, and it will go to your comic book shop so that they can call you and let you know when it's available to purchase.
Also, Previews magazine is like the coolest thing ever, which is where this information, I think, mainly came from.
Yes.
Previews, my father used to get it growing up, and it was just the best thing to look through because it shows you all the new comics, it shows you all the covers with all the beautiful art, but then there's all different toys and everything in there. So, yeah, I was just kind of like, oh yeah, Previews, that exists. And look, Darkwing's on the cover. Good for him. Good for him.
And the covers were very, we were talking about this before we started recording. I had different opinions about each cover because they're all a little different. And you can tell, like, some of these artists probably have never drawn a cartoon duck before, and it's very stylized. And I think most of the covers look cool. I'm pretty picky when it comes to Darkwing and the way he looks in general for anything. And the 2 big things that I look for is how his bill is drawn and his body shape, whether or not they keep him kind of his standard upright, I don't know, duck form as opposed to a more jelly bean classic DuckTales body.
Yeah, and the Disney Ducks bean body.
Yeah, those are the 2 things I look out for, and also just his eyes. I find, like, even with merch, when they're making merchandise, they always mess up his eyes for some reason.
Yeah, he gets a little crazy eyes sometimes. There is a new statue that I think was just announced or something recently.
Yes.
That is, you probably know off the top of your head. That one looks pretty good.
It looks pretty decent. I was still a bit picky about it, but I might purchase it eventually. But it's him standing on, kind of similar to the QMX. It's him standing on a statue, and he's holding his cape in one of his hands, and it's like you can hang it up. It's got like a little attachments on it.
Oh, I didn't even notice that. Oh, it's Diamond Select.
Yes.
Yeah, he's just kind of on like a rooftop, and his cape is blowing out. But he looks like himself, which isn't always the case in the Darkwing merchandise. I mean, I guess to me, he looks like himself. I think he looks pretty cool. Very dynamic.
Yeah, so I have already pre-ordered all of the covers.
Have you?
Yes. As soon as I found out that it was something I could do online, I went and I made a previews account, and I was able to. It turns out my local comic book shop, there's actually a few in my city, and they were on the site, so I connected through them, and I actually subscribed to it. So I guess that means it'll automatically, every time issues are released, I guess it'll pick them out for me, which is kind of nice. But I bought all the variant covers. The only ones I didn't get were the ones that were $100 and $50.
Yeah.
But they're
obvious ones.
Yeah, just because I can't really afford it, but also it's the same art as the other ones, just fancier. Like, I think one of them is like a metal cover, or it's metallic or something like that. But
Doubles as a weapon.
Yeah, but the regular version of that is $3.99, so that's the one I went for.
That price tag. That could also be a weapon. You could just cut somebody with it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know though. If they release a really banging Negadeck cover in the future, I might have to drop the $100 if they charge that much for it.
We would expect nothing less from you.
But yeah, that's what we got right now as of recording this. So keep your eyes peeled, everybody. It looks like January is the first issue dropping, and hopefully I will be able to get it pretty quickly, which means we can talk about it on the podcast when that happens.
Darkwing news.
And then we got listener mail.
Oh, yes.
This listener mail just came in today, but it is related to the comics, so I thought it would be appropriate to read it now while we're still talking about comics. It is from our regular listener and regular writer-inner, Write as Rainy.
Hello, Rainy.
Hello, Rainy. And it says, Dear Ange and Kitty, how are you? I hope you're both doing well. You deserve it. Congratulations on making it through the Boom Studios comics. You made it. Not that it wasn't a lot of fun, because I know Kitty was enjoying the normal size ties and missed opportunities for puns so much.
No.
And Ange loved all the random baseball and American politics.
Yeah. Something for everyone.
Something for everyone. Now that we've been through the Boom story and all of the good, the bad, and the ugly that went with those stories, I have a few questions for you. You talked a lot about missed opportunities in the comics, like how they could have used already existing characters and more universe-accurate hijinks, different ways that you would have preferred for the storylines to flow, things like that. But if the comics were up to you, what stories would you have liked to tell? What kind of arcs would we get from a hypothetical Sleepless in St. Canard Studios run? Any plot lines, characters, or dynamics, etc. I would love to know how you would have approached a Darkwing comic story. And in the vein of comics, the new Dynamite run of Darkwing was announced recently. What are your hopes and expectations for that run? Will you be covering them on the podcast as they are released, or will you wait until arcs are finished before reading and then decide if you'll include them in the podcast? Or if it's TBD, that's okay too. Bonus question, what would you think of a Darkwing Duck movie? Not like the Rescue Rangers movie, please. I hope this kind of movie never happens again. Given that a lot of Darkwing's appeal comes from the range of his adventures, sci-fi to fantastical, action, espionage, and slice of life, how do you think he would do in a film? Some mediums work well with some stories and others not so much. So I'd love to hear what you think. And if you do think a Darkwing film would work, what kind of story, sci-fi, fantastical, etc., do you think would work best for it? Thank you so much as always for the show and giving me something Darkwing to look forward to. I love getting to hear your thoughts and sharing in the joy of the show with you and everyone who listens and interacts with the podcast. And thank you for putting up with my mammoth emails. I appreciate you both so much. You're awesome.
You're awesome, Rainey.
You are awesome.
And it is absolutely our pleasure to sit here and talk about ducks, because even if this microphone wasn't in front of my face right now, this is literally what we would be doing. Now we could share it with other people. And you know what? I don't understand how we've made so many of these so far. It doesn't feel like we've done as many as we actually have. But for me, it's just to talk to my friend once a week. And I sometimes forget that other people do listen to this.
Me too.
Yeah, I'm glad that you guys enjoy it. As far as the questions go, so the first thing that sticks out in my mind, though, is I might be crazy and you might come at me with a pitchfork, but I feel like if they did a Darkwing movie, basically just forget that the Rescue Rangers movie happened the way it did and did it as a Darkwing movie, it may have worked better. Because, like, you know, Darkwing had his heyday and then fell out of fame, then has to, like, reclaim the mantle type thing. Might not have been so bad. And we all know that he was the best part of that movie anyway. Yeah, but that would also assume, which in my book, if Darkwing ever has fame, you're doing it wrong. So Darkwing always has to be the butt of the joke. Even when he should be praised, he's still like, you know, he'll do something amazing and then the news will cut away to a water skiing squirrel or something. Like, wait, something more important is happening right now. There's live footage of this puppy licking an ice cream cone. But yeah, I feel like it really depends. Like, we obviously don't want a grim, dark Darkwing movie. Like, you know, I don't know, it's tricky. Because I feel like really the only way that I could have been on board with the Darkwing movie and not been, you know, my old dejected and kind of burned too many times self is if it did come out when I was a kid. Because I feel like if a Darkwing movie came out when I was a kid, it wouldn't have mattered. I would have loved it. And then, you know, like the DuckTales movie was so good. So I felt like they could have done something interesting with it. It would have just been like a long episode of the show, but it still would have been fresh, I guess, in the, you know, the kids' minds that they didn't need an origin story movie. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's also so tempting to throw all of the interesting villains in one movie, which I feel like the Batman movies have struggled with quite a lot in all of their iterations. It would have to be narrowed down to what villain would be a good villain for the movie and not get too greedy with the rogues gallery. What do you think, Ange?
I've had so many thoughts over the years about both the comics and the movies and stuff, like what I would do. And don't come for me, people, but I think that Darkwing Duck would actually work really well, at least in a big movie, as CGI. Specifically, when I think of, for some reason, the first movie that comes to mind is Big Hero 6, which I saw in theaters, and it was kind of, you know, it was cartoony. It had like superhero stuff in it. I feel like animation and specifically CGI has reached the point where they can capture the fun, bouncy cartooniness of 2D animation in a higher quality. Like, it depends. Like, TV shows that are CGI are hit and miss because they're on a smaller budget, so sometimes it doesn't look as great. But if we're talking about a theatrical release, a full-length Darkwing Duck movie where, you know, they have a huge budget, I think they could do something really fun that is CGI animated, nothing too hyper realistic or, you know, uncanny valley, still cartoony, still has all the squash and stretch and, you know, toon physics and everything. Release that in theaters and I would do a retelling. Doesn't have to be a retelling of Darkly Dawns the Duck. I would update it for this generation and this time, like this, I don't know, roughly 2022 era. And when I think of Darkwing in particular, I think what would have been interesting is the one thing I never quite got about the original version of Darkwing is that he went from being this like bachelor loner guy who like lives in a tower and has no friends or family, and he stepped into the father role immediately, naturally. There was no struggles, there was nothing. It was just he was Gosling's dad, and there was nothing really addressed about that. So I think it would be interesting if instead, when Gosling meets him, he's now a millennial, because we have reached the point where millennials are adults now in their 30s and their 20s. So he's a millennial, but instead of being more like the responsible, had a regiment in the morning, never forgets the milk, he's very sloppy and doesn't really know how to take care of himself, and he's kind of every other millennial who's just trying their best to be an adult and failing miserably because the economy sucks and there's not a whole lot of jobs and there's a lot of stuff going on that makes it difficult to be an adult. And I think that would
certainly could not afford the house on Avian Way. That's for damn sure.
No, I could see him like bumming off Wi-Fi as he's in this tower because the Wi-Fi is the strongest there, and he's just squatting there essentially. So when he meets Gosling, there's more of a struggle where he's helping this girl and he's like, I have this small child under my care and I can barely take care of myself. And then through that, they would both learn together how to care for each other and how to form a family, and he would learn to become a bit more responsible through, suddenly acquiring a child. And I don't even know how that would work. You'd have to do some suspension of disbelief, because I feel like some random guy with no like history of existing that we know of just shows up and tries to adopt a child is probably not going to be able to do that.
Launchpad is actually an expert forger and just forges all the adoption documents.
Oh my god, I can see it.
He took a crash course in forgery.
Yeah, like I'm getting a little off topic here, but I guess what I'm saying is, for me, so it would have to be a couple different movies, because I would not be able to fit everything into one movie. But the first movie would be establishing Darkwing, meeting Gosling and Launchpad, and then there'd be at least one villain that gets a villain origin through that movie, and I'd pick one of the Fearsome Five. Maybe Bushroot or Quackerjack, or just one of the characters has like some kind of background where he's introduced, and then
it could work really nicely with Quackerjack, since Gosling's a little kid. It would flow with the narrative already being set.
Yeah, and you could really, you bring that in. I don't know, like Taurus Bulba, I feel like he's kind of iconic and he really starts it, but I feel like telling a direct retelling of Darkly Dawns would be kind of boring, because it's already good. Darkly Dawns is already perfect. It doesn't need to be rehashed or remade. So,
well, it is missing the Muddlefoots, but other than that.
Well, the Muddlefoots would show up at the end of the movie too. They'd be introduced.
So they're the after credits scene?
Yeah,
they're mid credits, and then Morgana is after credits.
The after credits would probably be a Negaduck hint that he's watching from afar or something like that. And then the next movie would be the Fearsome Five or something.
He's in the garbage can across the street. He just pops the lid open.
I would introduce at least one villain in the first movie with an origin, maybe even Megavolt. I don't know. One of the Fearsome Five, I think, would be perfect. And then at the end of the movie, whichever character it is gets mysteriously dragged away or ends up, talking to a character off screen who is obviously Negaduck or something like that. And then the next movie, the sequel, would be the appearance of the Fearsome Five. And then he'd meet Morgana. And Morgana's villain, story would be longer, at least in a movie. Not so much, but if it were a TV show, I would drag her out being a villain much longer. But for the purposes of a movie, I would have Morgana show up with the Fearsome Five, working with Negaduck. And then, obviously, by the end of the movie, she switches over and she helps Darkwing and the gang, because she realizes that Negaduck is crazy and violent and will murder a child. And she's not okay with that.
Okay. And then as far as the comic goes, I would have at least one issue dedicated to the Muddlefoots.
Of course you would.
And then there would have to be there would be a lot of Darkwing and Gizmo Duck adventures.
Mm-hmm.
Because as I've realized watching this episode today, and I will talk about later, Darkwing and Gizmo Duck, their relationship pretty exactly mirrors Herb and Darkwing.
It does.
Yeah. So maybe I'm just a sucker for that dynamic.
It's like one is the dynamic of his superhero life, and the other is the dynamic of his personal life.
You put them both in a room together, and Darkwing will explode.
Similarly, the question about the comics, kind of the same vein as a movie, except more dragged out because you have more issues to. I mean, you would presumably have a bunch of issues to play with, so you could slowly unfold things.
It would also be fun to do like a throwback to like Darkwing Year Zero and see Drake trying to figure everything out by himself.
Yeah.
Even if it's just like a single arc, like you know, this is what could have, and then of course it could just be completely uncatted because that's the Darkwing Duck way.
There's a lot to think about there, and in my world where I run Disney now, there would be there would be the theatrical release of this big massive movie, and it would be treated and advertised similarly to any Disney movie that has come out that's like a really big movie in theaters. And then after that, there would be the spin-off cartoon, which would be 2D animated, and just continue for as long as I decree it so, because I'm the boss in this world and nobody can stop me.
That's it. You're the megalomaniac in charge of all animation, as is your
Exactly.
right. So it just your vision of a Darkwing movie just makes me think of the Mario Brothers trailer, but just mute it. Unless you want Darkwing to be voiced by Chris Pratt.
I mean, no.
Okay. Anything else? Did we miss any questions there?
I feel like
Got
we
them all.
kind of covered everything all at once by jumping through all of those things. But yes, thank you for all those questions. We're going to continue also because Rainey had asked about covering the comics on the
Oh,
podcast.
yeah, right. I feel like I'm going to use you as my barometer for that because even though I'm like, oh yeah, I'm interested in them, I'm going to tell you right now, I probably will not read them because I'm the worst. So if you want to buy them and then read them to me,
Yeah, I can do that.
we could do a live read of, I don't know if that's fair to whoever wrote them, or whoever is making them because the Boom comics have been out forever. Maybe we shouldn't do a blow by blow on new property coming out, but I'll trust your judgment, Ange.
I definitely would like to cover the first one as soon as it comes out, just because it's going to be fresh and new and exciting, and I want to really, get those
You're
first
gonna be
impressions.
vibrating off your chair to talk about it.
Yes, exactly. So I think we will go issue by issue and
Okay.
just as they're released. Because if they're released monthly, and I mean, technically, we record weekly, it doesn't always happen. It doesn't always get released weekly, but it would probably be in between other episodes of the podcast.
Okay. Again, I trust you with my life.
For now, let's get to last but not least, saving the best for last, our Herb Muddlefoot episode.
Also known as Kitty is eating good tonight, baby.
I told you I watched this one not that long. I mean, I don't know how long ago I watched it, but I remembered most of it. But when I was watching it, I was thinking about you the entire time. There were so many parts in this where I was like, oh my God, that's Kitty. That's actually her.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and I thought the same thing. So yeah, I don't know the last time I had watched this episode, but I was having a real rough day at work, and I usually don't take a lunch break because I'm so busy. But yesterday I was like, this, I'm going to lunch, and I went to lunch, and I sat in the parking lot of Panera eating my soup and just watched it, and like I could feel like the serotonin surging through my body. So thank you, Herb Muddlefoot, for all of your herbness. But yeah, so if you want to watch this episode and feel the surge of joy through you, it is on Disney Plus. It's season 1, episode 74, and the blurb is Darkwing is forced to team up with Agent Grizzlycoff, which is not entirely accurate. This is not another Drakelickoff romp. Grizzlycoff is treated more like an impending doom of the episode that they keep trying to avoid. He's the It Follows of secret Asian Russian bears in ice cream trucks.
And he's just kind of there. Like, he's not really a big part of the episode on the whole.
No, he's really not. And for most of it too, Launchpad's not even in it. It's purely just like the Drake and Herb show
Yeah.
today. Yeah. Which is a okay by me.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah. I thought it I mean I don't know. I feel like I could be a little biased, but I really enjoyed this episode. So we open up with domestic bros, Launchpad and Darkwing taking out their trash. And quite literally, it is garbage bags. As Drake talks about how perfect their life is because they can escape the dullness of suburban life with their crime fighting identities, and that neighbors can't bother them except the king of Avian Way himself. Herb makes an announcement, and they jump into a bush to hide from him because he's in quackerware selling mode, which is true because Herb is in his business suit. Do you know he really means business? But the evasive
Oh.
maneuvers do not fool our light and love Herb, as he can smell a consumer a mile away and promptly starts pitching his products to Drake and Launchpad.
Herb's in his quackerware selling mode, and I can't stand the way he says, "Hey, neighbor!" Oh, the joys of adjoining yards.
This is our biggest seller, Model Q-7301, but I call it Buddy.
What is this, career day at kindergarten? Oh my gosh, the flash quack.
Yeah, he shows the bros his best-selling quackerware bowl, which he has dubbed Buddy. And Drake is somehow not instantly impressed and asks, "What is this, career day at kindergarten?" He is so salty, and then he just takes like a turn halfway through this episode, which is pretty great too. But we'll talk about that when we get there. But there's also a lot of fourth wall breaking in this episode, which I usually enjoy. So yeah, Drake is talking to us directly quite a bit. And Drake himself is pretty top notch this episode, I must say. Muddle footing aside, we get to see like a few different shades of him, and I think he gets to shine quite a bit outside of the Darkwing parts too. Like we get to see like a lot of Drake in this. He gets to be completely irritated by Herb just as existing, basically. But he also gets super into selling quackerware, which we'll get to. But overall, I just really liked him in this episode. It's a different shade of the same kind of relationship he and Gizmoduck have that I mentioned earlier. So maybe I'm coming to the realization today that maybe that's why I just love them so much, because Herb is so just joyfully ignorant of Drake's hatred of him. And it's funny. It's just really funny. What do you think of Drake in this episode? Like,
I actually found him to be quite likable, and I thought it was kind of sweet because there's points in it where he doesn't like Herb, but he doesn't have any vicious intentions towards him, and when it comes down to it, he will actually, step up and protect him.
Yeah. Because there's certain episodes where Drake is just awful. He's just such a jerk. He's pretty good in this one. Like, there's a few digs that he takes at her, because of course he does. But I just found him very endearing in this episode too, and you get to see like a little bit of vulnerability in him too, which is interesting. We'll get to all this. Anyway, Herb's little buddy, he's doing his whole shtick there, like trying to sell it to him, and a flash quack shows up, and Drake catches, like he leaps up onto Herb's shoulders. Like he's a little kid, like trying to see the fireworks on the 4th of July, and it catches it in Buddy in the little bowl, and he starts to deflect any confusion Herb might have. But his head looks exactly like his bowl, and it's the nicest compliment that Herb has ever gotten, I guess. So, desperate to get away, Drake winds up buying into Herb's upsells and gets back inside to check the flash quack. We don't really know what it says, because the next thing we see is him just poofing into Shush headquarters. And we actually do not get a full "I am a terror that flaps in the night" in this episode. He starts it here, but then he doesn't finish it because Jake Enderhooter is having the weirdest day of his life. He just is not paying attention to Darkwing, which is very strange for me. He's like a little zombie in this one scene that he's in. He's only in this one scene. He opens his eyes, I think, like twice. He's just got his eyes. Jake Ander is having a bad day. He's just like, I just need you guys to not. So he just seems very broken this episode, because Darkwing is doing his I'm the Terror, and he just like is walking into the next room. He's like, "You never cease to amaze me," and he just goes on to talk about how he needs him to team like he has a mission for him, and before he can even finish the thought that he needs him to team up with Grizzly Cough, Darkwing cuts him off and starts talking shit about Grizzly Cough, and Jay Gander just like reins them in with talking about business. He's also wearing his business suit. It's not as nice as Herb's. Or he wants them to catch a notorious jewel thief who's operating in St. Canard, who's disguising himself as a quackerware salesman. And he hands them a picture of, oh no, it's Herb!
And what's this foul fiend's fetish?
A quackerware salesman.
Quackerware?
A brilliant cover. Look.
Herb? There's a mistake here, Jake Gander. Herb Muddlefoot is not your man. I refuse to take this case.
You won't take the case? Well, you're not one of our agents, so technically I can't make you take it.
You certainly can't.
Agent Grizzlycoff, I now officially turn this case over to you.
A lot of people have pictures of Herb in this episode.
It's true.
It's pretty funny. Because with a few exceptions, it's all different pictures. So he's just, the camera loves him. He hands him this picture of Herb, and surprisingly, at least to me, Darkwing immediately launches it to Herb's defense. Maybe just because he knows that Herb does not have, shall we say, the mental fortitude to be a master criminal. But seeing as how he nearly let the Grim Reaper drag him away in his place in Dead Duck, I was happy to see Drake defend the sweetest of all angels and refuses to take the case. And Jigander is just like, oh, okay, Grizzly Cough can handle it. And Grizzly Cough just straight up woke up, wanted to murder a man today. just has a gun. And he's like, I'll take care of it. Drake is like, no, you cannot have the right to bear arms right now. And he claims that he is the exotic villains expert, which I don't know that I've ever heard that before, but maybe that is his role in Shush. You remember anything else about him being declared as the exotic villains expert?
Darkwing or Grizzly Cough?
Darkwing.
No, usually they just mention him as being like an off-the-books free agent who does it.
Consultant or something.
Yeah, he does his own thing for them.
That would make a lot of sense to me if he was considered the exotic villains expert that they call in on Weird Ones. But anyway, he demands that they drop the case entirely, and Grizzly Cough grabs the gun back and continues to talk about how he's going to murder the love of my life. And Drake decides that he has to protect Herb and will achieve this by joining Herb in the quackerware trade. So he shows up to the Muddlefoot house, and Herb is just amazed to learn that Darkwing wants to know about quackerware and immediately takes him under his wing, ushering him into his house where he has a mountain of plastic containers in his living room. And there are a lot of rhymes in this episode. I tried to write them all down. So the first one is, "You're a millionaire with quackerware." And then we cut to Herb with eyebrows delivering some quackerware to a woman. And we are soon shown that this is not our sweet, gentle green bean of a man, and that is a jewel thief. As the merchandise he drops off sprouts legs and sucks up all the valuables in the house, making little noises that sound like Herb to me.
Herb.
But they could just supposed to be like, I think it might also just, they're supposed to be making that little Tupperware burp sound. Was Tupperware a big thing anywhere else? Was like, did you guys have like Tupperware parties in Canada and all that?
I think we did, actually. I personally did not attend any of these parties, but Tupperware was always, around and was a thing.
Yeah. Like my mom had a couple, like there was a couple Tupperware parties, and that was always like the big thing was like, it's sealed if it lets out a little burp. So I'm wondering if that's what it was. But it honest to God, it sounds like they're saying Herb, but that could just be me projecting on them.
No, I heard it as Herb too.
Turning ordinary quackerware into thieving robotic slaves is Weasel Loman's success of the century! I just need more raw material.
So they're his biggest fans as well, which, as they should be. So our evil person this episode is a sort of Richard Nixon impression guy who's a weasel His name is Weasel Loman, which is a play on Willy Loman from the play Death of a Salesman. And
Oh.
he's just like a Weasley dog-faced guy, pointy teeth. He's wearing a very good Herb mask, and he also does a pretty decent Herb impression.
A trashy Herb.
he is a trashy Herb, but like his voice, like he does a very
Yeah.
good Herb impression vocally. But yeah, he is a disgraced Quackerware salesman who somehow figured out how to make Quackerware alive. He says robots, but then he just kind of like talks about mutating them. So he's using the magical art of to make Quackerware evil and want to steal things for him. But he needs access to more Quackerware, corrupt it, which I don't really understand because the Quackerware always comes back to him. Maybe he just wants more so that he can have them out and he doesn't have to keep using the same set. I don't know. He doesn't really elaborate too much. He just does his whole Richard Nixon thing for a little bit. But he also has a picture of Herb. So everybody pins them up by their heart. It's you remember Hark a Vagrant by Kate Beaton? It was like the webcomic.
Yes.
I forget who it was. I think it was, I don't know. I think it was just random characters, and it was Nemesis, and they're like sword fighting, and it was revealed that both of them have like little lockets with the picture of their Nemesis in it around their neck. That's this guy and Herb.
Perfect.
Meanwhile, back with the real deal, is giving Drake and Launchpad a stirring presentation. He has a transforming suitcase that turns into a full like display cabinet that has some of his Quackerware in it. He shows Drake the key around his neck to where he keeps the rest of his stock. I wonder if that will come in later.
Ho ho ho.
Oh, and then we get another rhyme. Like a second home to me is the Quackerware factory. The bane of Drake's existence, other than Herb Muddlefoot, is the Quackerware bowl itself, which has like a little button on the bottom that I guess you would use to break the seal so you can open it. And there's a little rhyme we learn about this. A summer, winter, spring, or autumn, press the button on the bottom. And the lid flies off and hits Drake in the face. He's also told that you have to dress for success. Drake just stares at the camera and he's like, yes, I chose to be here. He's not enjoying himself, but he's, very kind-heartedly making sure that no one comes for Herb. So I'll take it. And Herb is telling him that to be a Quackerware salesman, he has to be like a secret agent and he has to wear a suit. So he gives him a hilariously oversized suit that is one of his own, slaps a hat on his head, and he's just so excited. He's so excited that Drake is interested. And then he throws his, transforming briefcase at him, and Drake gets crushed and looks completely miserable by everything. And then he starts a slideshow. Back when they were actually like projectors and you had to have like film slides in them. Rule number 1 is you got to know your product. Rule number 2 is you got to know the territory, which is a Music Man reference. I appreciate any and all Music Man references. So my hat's off to you, writer of this episode. And then the next slide is a photo of Herb with a trophy. And Launchpad asks what it is.
What's that, Herb? Oh, nothing. That's me winning the Salesman of the Year award. I don't know how that got in there.
Salesman of the Year? Herb must have a pretty good product here.
Another Salesman of the Year?
No. That's Salesman of the Decade.
Decade?
Well, just one decade.
And then the next slide is Herb with a giant trophy. Huge. It's like taller than he is. And Launchpad's like, oh, another Salesman of the Year. And Herb is so shy. He's just kind of like looking down and like wringing his hands. He's like, oh no, that one's just for a Salesman of the Decade.
He's so bashful. It's cute.
He is. And both of them are like, the decade? And he's like, well, it's just one decade. And then Launchpad rushes over to him and he's like, oh, you're a real hero. Spoken like a true Scrooge McDuck employee, brainwashed to the king of capitalism. It's just so funny. And now Drake is super motivated to start selling Quackerware. And Herb is super excited that he's super motivated. And tells him that a salesman's zeal is the airtight seal on a Quackerware deal. And hugs him. And then just randomly throws him. For no reason. He lands in the Quackerware pile, and that's how that scene ends. And then he takes Drake along with him on his sales route, and the lady that answered the door gives the only appropriate response to her being at her door. And then I wrote here, is this character me?
Yes. Yes, it is you.
Because she is completely starstruck.
Good day, madam. Muddlefoot here, Herb Muddlefoot. Let me introduce the Quackerware brand, the fave of...
Herb Muddlefoot, my stars! Well, everybody knows who you are. Whatever you've got, I'll take it. Oh, wait till I tell my friend Doris that Herb Muddlefoot was here.
Wow, Herb Muddlefoot's got groupies.
And offers to buy everything he has, and talks about how her friend is going to be so jealous. And Drake is suddenly aware that he lives in a world where there are Herb Muddlefoot groupies. But the jingling of bells alerts Drake to the sinister ice cream truck that is pulled up outside this house as Grizzly Cuff, one bear murder machine, shows up. Ice, the Duke of door-to-door sales. And I'm really wondering why it's like sleigh bells every time this ice cream truck drives by. Like, it's a little weird, but you know what? It's what we got. So he tries to shoot Herb, and Drake protects him by knocking him into a garbage can, and he then avoids getting a plunger shot into him, and Herb rolls down the street in the garbage can, and Grizzly Cough somehow gets plunged to a passing truck and hauls off after it. Drake then retrieves Herb from the trash because treasures do not belong in the landfill, and apologizes to him. But Herb, ever the optimist, declares, you can shake it, but you just can't break it. And
Beautiful.
Drake, I think, face palms as hard as he possibly can. The next house that they go to, Drake wants to be tagged in, and with some sage advice of Quackerware, we'll take you there. You get to see Drake in his seriously oversized suit attempt to be a normal person.
Do you know what this reminds me of? No, you wouldn't know this because this is a childhood thing. Okay, I was trying to figure it out because this kept triggering some sort of like deep-seated childhood memory for me. So my dad was a mailman, like a letter carrier. And he brought me along to one of those like bring your kids to work day things, and he had me put on like one of his mailman uniforms. I was like 8 years old, so just like Drake, it was like weirdly massive on me. And then he let me go up to the houses and deliver the mail, and he also did businesses, so I had to go into like the receptionist and give them the mail. And it just like Drake in the oversized suit trying to do this. I was like, oh, this kind of feels like me when I was a child.
I feel seen. This is bringing up deep-seated trauma for me. Oh, so little pseudo-Ange / Drake is trying to talk to this woman. He drops the heavy briefcase on her foot, and then it explodes on him. She's overall not very impressed, but asks him to show her how the Quackerware works, and of course he can't get it open because he forgot the beautiful little rhyme that Herb taught him. But the lady, obviously smarter than Drake, presses the little button on the bottom of it, and it hits Drake like a cannonball, and he goes flying. He just flies out of the yard, and Herb finds him in some bushes. And before he can say anything, fumbles through just a weird mix of all of the little rhymes that he's heard so far, and starts begging Herb to let him try the next one. So eager to like prove himself. So he's just like desperate to be good at it, and it's kind of sweet. And Herb agrees because he's the best, and he just tells him, if you get stuck, remember to call me for help. And somehow Drake is even more terrible the next house that he goes to. He can't even get through his name. He's just too nervous. He's just too in his own head, and he's screwing everything up. And the woman isn't impressed and turns to go back inside, and he literally puts his foot in the door and gets it smashed. And that's it for that lady. And then we see her putting a cast on his leg as Drake laments his lousy salesmanship. As not Herb with the eyebrows looks on, hiding behind some trees. And Herb knows what just to do to cheer Drake up, and he whips out the Quackerware cheer.
My favorite.
Which he does a whole routine to.
Drake, old pal, here's something to help you out. The Quackerware cheer. Like the 100 legs on a centipede, we move forward in a great stampede. Even the other guys must concede. Quackerware salesmen are a special breed.
I never knew you were so talented, Herb.
Muddlefoot has a new apprentice. He never let me be his apprentice.
He's laying on the ground, like swinging his arms and legs around like he's a centipede, and then he's crawling around the bench that Drake is sitting on, and he just kind of pops up and does a little bit of a Captain Morgan pose on the bench to finish it all off. And Drake admits that he never knew that Herb was so talented. And it's funny because you forget, too, that basically 90% of this episode is just Jim Cummings talking to himself.
It is. I always forget that Jim Cummings is also Herb Muddlefoot, which is pretty impressive, I gotta say. Just, I do like the role reversal here where Drake is the one that is kind of out of his element and he has to rely on someone he normally doesn't respect at all. And it's like his respect in this sphere for Herb just seems to rise. Like he's actually impressed at certain points at like...
Yeah. It seems like he just, every time that something else happens, he just gets a little bit more respect for Herb, which I'm sure doesn't last through the night. But in this particular episode, he's not being too cross with him. He's not trying to ditch him. Like, he's still kind of like, oh my God, you're so weird. But he definitely sees that Herb is successful and that people like him, which also could speak to Darkwing wanting to be successful and liked, you know, have his own groupies, which he doesn't. So Herb would definitely teach him the ways of how to be popular with the housewives. Sounds scandalous. But he would never.
I was going to say, Herb is so loyal to Binky, he would never.
Oh, imagine if this is how he met Binky.
Actually, that would make a lot of sense.
Door-to-door sales. He showed up to sell her some bowls, and instead, she stole his heart.
And then she just keeps calling him back for more product just so she can see him again. Oh, that would be such a cute love story. I would, you know what? I hope if the comics or the cartoons ever do the Muddlefoots, I'd love to see a flashback to how they met.
So, and then we already know what their first date was like. They were dancing, but Vicky's house, she can't even get out of it properly because there's so much quackerware inside that it's like a landslide every time she moves. I like it. Let's put it down. Let's mail it to the imaginary desk of Ange, the head of Disney, and cement it in stone. So the weasel guy is rightfully jealous as he peers around some trees watching this whole exchange happen that Drake is Herb's apprentice, and he mostly just wants the quackerware samples that are in this transforming briefcase. And he makes a crank call of someone unhappy with their quackerware purchase to Herb, who has a dedicated beeper just for phone calls. Herb, as he answers the phone, also gives us the groundwork that there's never a complainer with a quackerware container.
Herb Muddlefoot here. There's never a complainer with a quackerware container. Oh, am I speaking to?
Oh, this is Mrs. John Q. Public, and I'm a complainer. I don't like my quackerware. I demand a refund now.
Oh, no. This is horrible. Quick, give me your address, ma'am.
So he's very distressed to hear that somebody wants a refund and rushes off to right this grave wrong, telling Drake to stick to the route, keep the samples, and he'll pick them up on a few blocks. And we also see that Herb drives a hot rod. Like, Herb is making bank doing quackerware sales. So that could also be a incentive for Drake to stick around. The king of multi-level marketing here, Herb Muddlefoot. So yeah, Drake is left with the samples and declares that he'll sell the quackerware if it kills him, under the impression that if Herb can succeed doing this, so can he. There's Drake's motivations. Weasel, in his Herb disguise, sneaks up on him and steals the samples. But Grizzly Calf is back and delighted as ever as he tries to murder him and just straight up shoots a bomb at them this time. Just as Woman grabs the samples, Drake gets hit with the bomb and it gets blown up, and of course he's fine because he's Drake. But then he chases down who he thinks is Herb, begging for another chance. Grizzly Calf notes that Muddlefoot has an Acropolis instead of accomplice, and is happy to kill two birds with one stone and starts chasing them down. just
Grizzly
like it
Cough is
follows.
just, for a secret agent, he's really not being subtle, just busting out guns in the middle of a suburban neighborhood, trying to murder
No.
2 salesmen.
No, he's really not. And Drake distracts him and lures him into jumping into a sewer, which buys them some time. Yeah, Grizzly Cough is ranking 0 out of 0 on the secret agent scale, even if he is driving around in a jingling ice cream truck. Still throwing bombs at salesmen on the street. So Loman as Herb goes back to his lair, convert the regular Quackaware he just stole into his robot, mutated, sentient, herb-loving versions, and then paints them gold so that he can sell them to rich people. Herb gets to the address where the unhappy customer allegedly is, and he's just standing in the middle of the desert.
Oh, poor Herb.
Poor Herb. But you know what that means? There really is never a complainer about a Quackaware container. Drake catches up to Loman in his Herb disguise and tells him, I never thought I'd say this, but you're a real pro, when he sees that he's pitching Quackaware to these rich people. And yeah, again, just this weasel guy does a really good Herb impression. It's also just another feather in the cap of Jim Cummings that he is now doing somebody doing a Herb impression, because he doesn't sound exactly like Herb. Sometimes he sounds exactly like Herb, but other times you could tell it's not Herb.
He's ruder and just like really short and in a rush. Herb is a salesman who truly loves what he's doing, but this version of Herb, you can tell he doesn't give any F's about what he's actually doing, and it's just, I don't know, Jim Cummings is good at doing that.
He is.
You know, Herb, I never thought I'd say this, but you are a pro.
Ha! You know it, kid. Stick with me and we'll swing into some high gear selling.
Yes?
Hey, you should buy some Quackaware, pal. It's real good, see?
So Snooty Butler answers the door, and Imposter Herb is like, hey, you should buy this stuff. It's real great. Basically, is the sales pitch. And the butler's not impressed until he sees that it's gold and is immediately on board. Drake wonders at why he didn't see the gold Quackaware in the catalog, and the faker sends him to the next house so he can collect the jewels from the Quackaware thieves. The real Herb gets back with some sweet driving skills and asks Drake what he's doing on this street. And Drake is like, I came here with you. And then, oh no! The deceiver is revealed. Herb is outraged that whoever he is, he's selling fake Quackaware, and he is furious. You get to see Herb Muddlefoot go through the whole range of emotions. He is boiling hot and completely comes down on this guy like the wrath of God and rips up a lawn to trip him. So he tries to yank him back to his feet and pulls the mask off, and then he recognizes who's underneath. And he is very, very angry, and he tells this guy that he's a disgrace to the Quackaware Corps, a stain on the bowl of life. And then this guy, he starts talking shit about Quackaware being an inferior product, and now Herb is really mad.
It's Weasel Loman.
Yes, that's right, Muddlefoot.
He was a disgrace to the Quackaware Corps, a stain on the bowl of life.
Well, listen to the Boy Scout. Quackaware's a 10th-rate product that took me to realize its true potential.
You can disgrace yourself, and you can disgrace me, Weasel. But when you start messing with Quackaware, that's it for old Herb Muddlefoot. Come on!
As he's doing this, like, he says, come on, like, really aggressively. They start playing, like, the funeral dirge. Like, he's gonna kill. It's like, dun, 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 dun. Like, Herb is going to murder this man. And they start sumo wrestling on this rich guy's front lawn. And, of course, now Grizz's jingling ice cream truck rolls up again, and Drake is like, oh, Grizzly Cough's here, and he climbs into a tree to change into Darkwing, and then chainsaws his way out of the bottom of the trunk
For no reason.
For no reason. Grizz just immediately blows his cover to run across the street and yell at Darkwing for working on his case. And Weasel books it. But in this whole thing here, Grizzlycoff sees that Herb is actually the innocent angel that we know he is. And he drives off after Loman, with Darkwing tagging along. Herb, meanwhile, chases the rogue Quackerware creatures as the car chase starts to ramp up, and Grizzlycoff tries to shoot Loman's car with the freeze ray and misses. Then Darkwing is like, oh, let me do it, and then shoots the road. And then the ice cream truck goes skidding off into oblivion, and Darkwing crashes somehow onto Loman's car. And we get our second almost I am the terror that flaps in the night, because he gets to I am the terror that flaps in, and then he squishes against the windshield and says, your windshield. And then he somehow falls off the roof of the car down a cliff.
Yeah.
And then just like 2 seconds later, Loman is driving right past him, and he doesn't get run over. He's just somehow randomly climbing into the back of the van at Loman's driving. But he's just driving through suburbia. I'm like, oh, just random cliff in the middle of suburbia. But yeah, they get back to a warehouse with like a full line of little Quackerware herb things walking into it, and gloating to his little Quackerware guys as he's got a giant pile of loot sitting there, and he starts gloating about how much more money he's going to make, and Darkwing just announces himself and is standing on top of the van, telling him that he's going to arrest him for all these terrible, terrible crimes, but the worst of all being doing a bad Herb impression. And Loman's like, I thought I was pretty good.
He was so insulted.
He was. Because, you know, he was doing pretty good. He did a pretty good job. Considering he's got a pretty big, like, snout, too. So I don't even know. He must have, like, had to bind it or something to fit in that duck mask. So he really went he was a method actor. He went the mile. But Dark was like, oh, well, it's lucky we'll never get to do a side-by-side comparison because Herb Muddlefoot is miles away, just as Herb is crawling through, like, the Quackerware doggy door. He's trying to reason with the Quackerware to turn them away from their life of crime. And, of course, Loman grabs him and holds him hostage with, like, a chomping Quackerware container, and tells Darkwing to drop his gun. And then he steals Herb's key to help himself to the endless supply of Quackerware in the factory.
Oh no!
And he throws Herb into, like, a tiny little Quackerware container and, like, runs off. Do his dastardly deeds. And then Darkwing gets attacked by Quackerware, and he kind of jumps off the van and then is getting attacked by Quackerware on the ground, and then he just kind of yells and they all run away.
They scatter.
They scatter at his battle cry, I guess. And then he wrestles with another bout of trying to open the Quackerware that has Herb in it. And he does remember the rhyme this time, but because the funny thing about Darkwing is that nothing ever works for him. It doesn't open until he sits on it, and then it opens up and he gets launched across the warehouse. But Herb is free! And Herb and Darkwing team up to take down Loman at the Quackerware factory. A bit of attempted, like, you know, because they get there and Darkwing is pretending like, you know, he's I don't know, doing his Darkwing thing. And there's like a bit of attempted, like, manslaughter via forklift because Loman's trying to kill him. And then, you know, circumstances happen, and it's, you know, basically cartoon stuff. It takes like 2 seconds. And then Darkwing's like, oh, well, we came to stop you. And then we see Herb is just standing on top of the racks of Quackerware. He's got Quackerware strapped all over him like armor, and he's throwing Quackerware at Loman. And he stubbed himself a one-man Quackerware defender. Loman scampers away, trying to make for his van, but Herb Tarzan swings into him, and then he and Darkwing just throw this guy into some machinery.
It was so like, him. Yeah, it was just like, let's just throw him in there. He's dead now.
Killing him for his crimes against Quackerware. And Grizzlycoff shows up and demands to know where the culprit is. They're like, oh, he's just about to come out the other end, and it's just him sitting in a big Quackerware bowl on the other side of the conveyor belt. So I don't really know what that machine's purpose is, but I was just like, oh, they just I just murdered this man, but he's fine. And then Grizzly Cough just rolls him out of the factory. And Darkwing and Herb have a nice little moment.
Oh, Mr. Muddlefoot, I just saw Drake Mallard outside. Good-looking cuss. And he wanted me to tell you something.
Really?
Yes, really. Drake said, like the 100 legs on a centipede,
we move forward in a great stampede. Even the other guys must concede. Quackaware salesmen are a special breed. Oh, that Drakester. What a guy.
Herb is so touched, he wipes a tear of joy away from his face as he says, "Oh, that Drakester, what a guy." And then the credits roll.
Beautiful.
It was a perfect episode. 10 billion out of 10 on the Quackaware freshness scale.
I feel like this one really, it doesn't get much attention. It kind of flies under the radar. And I think it's because usually what draws people into an episode and helps them remember it is the villains. And if the villains aren't super noteworthy, then the episodes tend to be ones that are overlooked. Mm-hmm. But in terms of like actual characterization for Drake, like you said, Drake has some really great moments in this episode that you don't really see for him. Because usually when we see Drake, it's usually in the form of him being a dad to Goslin and doing stay-at-home dad stuff.
Yeah, she wasn't even in this episode at all.
No, she was not.
We didn't get to see any kids.
Or Binky.
Yeah, there was no ladies in this episode other than the groupies.
Yeah, so, I mean, but in terms of what they did have, I thought it was quality.
Yeah, and the animation was very nice, too.
It was Disney Australia, which is generally considered one of the best studios that did Darkwing episodes. They also did Fungus Among Us.
Yeah. Because the animation was really nice. There was a couple times where I'm like, this looks really good right now. Like, Darkwing was very dynamic, and he was hitting a lot of good poses, and Drake was just adorable. Like, the one lady who I think shuts his foot in the door, he kind of juggles the Quackaware out, like, trying to impress her. But he's doing it with these giant sleeves on, so it's just, like, really awkward. But it was done so nicely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a fun story. It never felt like... I don't know. I love Herb Muddlefoot, so I can't really comment too much on the quality of it because it's already a perfect episode in my mind. But I really like that even though Dark is just so, or Dark/Drake are just completely annoyed with the Muddlefoots every time that they emerge, that he kind of wanted to learn from Herb in this one and gain some respect for him, which again, doesn't last beyond this episode, which is fine.
It's like we're living in Herb's world this time around, because usually when we see Herb, it's just from Drake's point of view of him being an annoying neighbor, and otherwise like we're focusing on the crime fighting stuff. But this was very much like we are on Herb's turf now. This is his territory and his life, and we get to see what he does for a living, and he's damn good at it.
He is. Door-to-door sales and sales in general is hard. You gotta give him props. He's salesman of the decade, and for good reason, because he's damn charming. He's a good egg, that Herb Muddlefoot, because it really doesn't hit any of the there's no supervillain. Shush is very loosely involved, but as far as apart from Loman, who is the real villain of this episode, Grizzly Cough is the only other threat, and it's just basically follows Drake and Herb for easily 80% of this episode, maybe even 90. So it's just purely these two characters that I don't think really ever get that much screen time together. They're usually just, scenes here and there, not like the entire episode structured around them. But yeah, I enjoyed it. It was good. How would you rate it?
I would give it a 4 out of 5 because, like you said, the animation is good. Everything about it is pretty good. I would just say in terms of villains and Grizzly Cough, not the most interesting villains, but they don't always have to be for an episode to be good. I mean, it helps, but it's a solid episode. There's nothing I can really complain about or say that was really bad. I'd say the only thing, of course, was just Grizzly Cough just sort of looming in the background in his ice cream van as a threat.
Like, there wasn't even any cutaways of, like, little kids trying to buy ice cream from him or anything. He was just purely there to be a menace.
Yeah, good episode.
Yeah. So, there we have it. The Kitty Eats Good Today episode.
Let's find out if you're
Darkwing
going to
Duck.
be eating good next week or if you're going to end up with... I know one of your throw it in the dumpster episodes is still on our wheel.
Yeah, it's here. Somehow the wheel populated it on the red square, so that's appropriate. All right, here we go. Spinning. See what the cruel hand of fate has picked for us next week. Oh! Not very cruel at all, because next week we will be talking about In Like Blunt.
Oh, that's a pretty good episode.
I really like that one. That one I feel like I've watched a bunch. So I won't have the feeling of, oh, this is an episode I haven't seen before. Like, I don't remember the last time I watched The Merchant of Menace. Like, so basically watching this was like watching it for the first time, but I definitely have watched In Like Blunt before enough times that I'm smiling right now thinking about certain parts of it.
Mm-hmm.
So so that's exciting. All right, cool. So In Like Blunt next time. Sadly, there is not a Muddlefoot in sight in that episode, and I don't even think we get Goslin in that one either.
Yeah, I don't know. She might make a little cameo, but...
Brief appearance. Yeah. But there, oh, another Shush one. So there we go. It's a Shush Central over here on Sleepless and Shush Canard. But there we go. We have exciting things on the horizon, comic book-wise, merchandise-wise, and Derek Blunt-wise. So until then, dearest listeners, please remember that, like the 100 legs of a centipede, we've moved forward with a great stampede. Even the other guys must concede that Quackware salesmen are a special breed.
That's what I was gonna say, too.